Picture this. It's April 23rd, 1961. You're standing in the back of Carnegie Hall in New York City. The air is thick with the scent of expensive perfume, the rustle of silk dresses, and that low hum of a crowd that knows they're about to see history. Look to your left, and you see Audrey Hepburn. Look to your right, and there's Marilyn Monroe. Even the biggest stars in the world are sitting on the edges of their seats. Suddenly, the lights dim to a deep, velvety blue. A tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall, steps into the spotlight. She looks almost fragile standing there in that massive space. But then she opens her mouth. The first note doesn't just hit the room, it hits you in the chest like a physical weight. It's not just singing, it's like she's pouring her entire soul out for everyone to see. That night became known as the greatest night in show business history. People didn't just clap, they stood on their chairs, they cried, and they rushed the stage just to be near her. They were witnessing the magic of Judy Garland. But how did the girl who gave us the most famous song in history end up fighting so hard just to be heard? Today, in 2026, as we mark over 100 years of her legend, we're going behind the curtain. We're looking past the ruby slippers and the yellow brick road to find the real woman, the fighter, the mother, and the voice that will never die. This is the story of Judy Garland, and trust me, you've never heard it like this before. Long before the world knew her as Judy, she was just a little girl named Frances Ethel Gum. She was born on June 10, 1922, in a tiny town called Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Her parents, Frank and Ethel, were theater people, and Judy literally grew up in the wings of a stage. She made her debut when she was only 2.5 years old. It was Christmas night, and during a break in the show, she toddled out and started singing Jingle Bells. The audience went wild. She loved the attention so much that she just kept singing it over and over again. Her dad finally had to walk out and carry her off stage while she was still singing the chorus. But life wasn't always a holiday. Her mom, Ethel, was what we'd call a stage mother. She was determined to make her daughters famous. She moved the family to California, and soon the Gum sisters were traveling in a beat-up car, sleeping in tiny hotel rooms and performing 3 shows a night. It was a tough life for a child. While other kids were playing with dolls, Judy was learning how to time a joke and hit a high note. She learned something early on that would stay with her forever. When she was on stage, everyone smiled. It was the one place where she felt safe, and she spent the rest of her life trying to find that same feeling when the lights went down. In 1935, a 13-year-old Judy walked into the offices of MGM. Now, MGM was the biggest studio in the world. They used to brag that they had more stars than there are in the heavens. Judy didn't look like a movie star. She was short, she had a round face, and she was wearing a simple, homemade dress. But when she sang for the studio boss, Louis B. Mayer, the room went completely silent. He didn't even ask for a screen test. He signed her on the spot. He knew he had found a gold mine. But the studio was a strange, often scary place for a young girl. They treated her like a product on an assembly line. While other stars like Elizabeth Taylor were being praised for their beauty, the bosses told Judy she was their ugly duckling. Can you imagine being 13 years old and being told you aren't pretty enough by the most powerful men in the world? To fix her, they made her wear rubber discs in her nose to change its shape and caps on her teeth. Even worse, they put her on a diet of just chicken soup and black coffee. To make sure she could keep up with 18-hour workdays, the studio doctors gave the young actors medication to stay awake and stay thin. It was a dangerous cycle that started before she was even old enough to drive. Judy kept a smile on her face because she was a good girl and didn't want to let anyone down. But the pressure was building behind the scenes. Then came 1939, the year of the tornado. You might think Judy was the only choice for Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, but the studio actually tried to get Shirley Temple first. When that didn't work, they turned to 16-year-old Judy. To make her look like a 12-year-old girl, they had to bind her chest with painful bandages and make her wear a long brunette wig. The set was a total madhouse. The lights were so hot, sometimes over 100 degrees, that the actors in the heavy costumes were constantly fainting. The director was incredibly tough. He was famous for shouting just to get the right emotion out of his actors. But the biggest drama was the song Over the Rainbow. Believe it or not, the studio bosses tried to cut it from the movie 3 different times. They thought it was too sad and too slow for a kids' movie. But Judy and her vocal coach fought for it. They knew it was the heart of the film. When the movie finally came out, it didn't just make money, it became part of our history. Judy became the most famous teenager on the planet, and she even won a special miniature Oscar for her performance. She had finally found her somewhere over the rainbow, but as she would soon learn, staying at the top was harder than getting there. After Oz, Judy was paired up with a young ball of energy named Mickey Rooney. They became the most famous duo in America. They made movie after movie together, like Babes in Arms and Girl Crazy. On screen, they were full of joy and energy, dancing and singing until the sun went down. But off screen, they were exhausted. Mickey was like a brother to Judy, and they were the only ones who knew the truth about the long hours and the pills they were given to keep moving. Judy wanted to grow up, but the studio wanted her to stay a little girl forever. When she married a man named David Rose at 19, the studio was furious. They wanted her to be the girl next door, not a wife. They made her life miserable, and the stress began to take a toll on her health. In 1944, she made Meet Me in St. Louis, and something changed. She fell in love with her director, Vincente Minnelli. For the first time, someone at the studio looked at her and said, "You're beautiful, exactly as you are." They got married and had a daughter named Liza, and for a few years, Judy finally felt like she had a real home. She was a star, a wife, and a mother, but the studio factory was still running 24 hours a day. By the late 1940s, the years of working without sleep and the constant pressure were catching up. Judy was struggling with deep anxiety and exhaustion. She would show up late to the set because she was too tired to move, or she would be so nervous she couldn't remember her lines. In 1950, after 15 years of making millions for them, MGM did the unthinkable. They fired her. They didn't care about the years she had given them. They just saw her as a problem. Judy felt like her life was over. She went through a very dark period, but this is the part of the story I want you to remember. Judy Garland was a fighter. She checked herself into a hospital, got the help she needed, and decided to prove everyone wrong. She teamed up with a man named Sid Luft, and together they went to London. When she walked out on the stage of the London Palladium, she was terrified, but the audience didn't just clap. They stood up and roared for 5 minutes straight. They didn't care about the studio gossip. They just wanted Judy. That night changed her life. She realized she didn't need a movie studio to tell her who she was. She was the one and only Judy Garland. In 1954, Judy made her big return to movies with A Star is Born. It's a story about a woman whose career is exploding while the man she loves is struggling. It is widely considered one of the greatest performances ever filmed. On the night of the Academy Awards, Judy was in the hospital. She had just given birth to her son, Joey. There were TV cameras all over her hospital room, waiting to catch the moment she won the Oscar. But in one of the biggest shocks in Hollywood history, she lost to Grace Kelly. Even the other actors were upset. Groucho Marx sent her a telegram saying it was the biggest robbery since the Brinks heist. But Judy didn't let it break her. She had a family who loved her and fans who would follow her anywhere. She spent the next few years traveling the world, filling up stadiums and theaters, becoming the queen of the concert stage. In 1959, Judy got very sick with a liver illness, and doctors told her she was lucky to be alive. They said she would never work again and would likely be an invalid for the rest of her life. Judy's response? She got better, walked onto the stage of Carnegie Hall in 1961, and gave the performance we talked about at the start. It was a medical miracle. She followed that up with her own TV show, where she had a very special guest, a young girl named Barbra Streisand. In a moment that we still talk about in 2026, the two of them sang together. It was like the queen of the golden age was handing her crown to the queen of the next generation. Judy was a mother of 3 now, Liza, Lorna, and Joey. Her kids remember a house full of laughter and music. Even when things were tough, Judy kept the music playing. She was a funny, loving, and deeply resilient woman who refused to let the world turn her into a tragedy. The end of Judy's story is often told as a sad one, but it was also full of love. By 1969, Judy was living in London. She was tired, and her body was worn out from years of giving everything she had to her audience. She was performing at a club called Talk of the Town, and even on her toughest nights, she would crack jokes with the audience and sing her heart out. On June 22nd, 1969, her heart finally gave out. She was only 47 years old. When the news hit, 20,000 people lined the streets of New York just to say goodbye to their Dorothy. Her daughter Liza said it best. She didn't die from anything except being worn out. She had lived more in 47 years than most people do in 100. She had fought the biggest studio in the world, survived the darkest days, and never, ever stopped singing. So why does Judy Garland still matter in 2026? Why did the Library of Congress just spend a fortune to save her original recordings? It's because Judy represents the part of us that won't give up. She wasn't perfect, and her life wasn't a fairy tale, but she was real. She took her pain and turned it into a song that made millions of people feel less alone. She once said, "Always be a first-rate version of yourself instead of a second-rate version of somebody else." 100 years after her birth, Judy is still the ultimate first-rate version of herself. And as long as there is a child looking up at the sky, wondering if there's a place where troubles melt like lemon drops, Judy Garland will be right there in her blue gingham dress, reminding us that there really is no place like home, because there really was only one Judy.